The morning sun cast golden rays through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as 9-year-old Princess Charlotte Elizabeth Diana stood before her bedroom mirror. Her reflection showed a young girl with bright eyes and rosy cheeks, carefully brushing her long brown hair. Today was different from other days. Today marked exactly 3 years since her beloved great-grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, had passed away, and the entire royal family would gather for a private memorial service. Charlotte had always been known for her infectious smile and spirited personality. From the moment she could walk, she had charmed everyone around her with her confidence and warmth. Unlike her older brother, Prince George, who was more reserved and thoughtful, Charlotte wore her emotions on her sleeve. She laughed loudly, hugged tightly, and when she smiled, it lit up entire rooms. Her personal protection officer, Detective Sergeant James Mitchell, had been assigned to Charlotte's security detail 2 years earlier. At 34 years old, James was a seasoned member of the Metropolitan Police's Royalty and Specialist Protection Unit. He had served in the military before joining the police force, and his calm demeanor and sharp instincts made him perfect for protecting the young princess. James had grown fond of Charlotte during their time together. She reminded him of his own daughter Emma, who was the same age. Charlotte would often chatter away during car rides, telling him about her school lessons, her favorite books, or the latest adventures she'd had with her brothers. She had a particular fascination with horses and would spend hours talking about her riding lessons at the family's country estate. On this particular morning, Charlotte seemed quieter than usual as she prepared for the memorial service. James noticed the subtle change in her demeanor as he escorted her from her private apartments to join her parents, Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. The hallways of Kensington Palace, usually filled with Charlotte's laughter and quick footsteps, seemed more subdued. The memorial service was to be held at St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle, the same venue where Queen Elizabeth II had been laid to rest 3 years prior. The family had decided to keep the ceremony intimate, with only close family members and a few senior staff present. It was meant to be a time of quiet reflection and remembrance, away from the public eye and media attention that usually surrounded royal events. As the royal convoy prepared to leave Kensington Palace, Charlotte climbed into the back seat of the armored vehicle, where James sat beside her. Her parents followed in another car with Prince George and Prince Louis. The journey to Windsor would take about 45 minutes, giving Charlotte time to process her thoughts and emotions about the day ahead. During the drive, Charlotte stared out the window at the London streets passing by. She watched ordinary families going about their daily routines, children walking to school with their parents, people heading to work, couples enjoying morning coffee at outdoor cafes. Sometimes she wondered what it would be like to live a normal life, without the constant presence of security officers and the weight of royal protocol. James observed Charlotte's unusually quiet mood and gently asked if she was feeling all right. Charlotte turned to him with a small smile and nodded, but he could see something troubling in her eyes. She had always been mature for her age, perhaps a result of growing up in the unique circumstances of royal life. But today she seemed to carry a heavier burden than usual. As they approached Windsor Castle, the familiar sight of the ancient stone walls and towers came into view. Charlotte had many happy memories of visiting the castle with her great-grandmother. Queen Elizabeth II had always made special time for her great-grandchildren, and Charlotte cherished the private moments they had shared: afternoon tea in the Queen's private sitting room, walks in the castle gardens, and bedtime stories when the family stayed overnight. The convoy entered through the private entrance, away from the main gates where tourists and media might gather. Windsor Castle held deep significance for the royal family, serving as both a home and a symbol of British monarchy for nearly 1,000 years. For Charlotte, it was also the place where she had said her final goodbye to the most important woman in her life. Inside the castle, family members were already gathering in the private chapel. Charlotte's grandparents, King Charles III and Queen Camilla, stood near the altar speaking quietly with other relatives. Her aunt and uncle, Prince Harry and Meghan, had traveled from California specifically for this memorial service, marking one of their few visits to the UK since stepping back from royal duties. Charlotte felt the familiar knot in her stomach that came whenever the family gathered for solemn occasions. While she loved seeing her relatives, these formal events often felt heavy with unspoken emotions and complex family dynamics that she was only beginning to understand. She could sense the tension between different family members, even when they tried to present a united front. As the service began, Charlotte sat between her parents in the front pew. The chapel was filled with the soft glow of candles and the gentle fragrance of white lilies, Queen Elizabeth II's favorite flowers. The Archbishop of Canterbury spoke about the Queen's legacy of service, her unwavering dedication to duty, and the profound impact she had on the Commonwealth and the world. Throughout the service, Charlotte found herself thinking about the last conversation she had with her great-grandmother. It had been just 2 weeks before the Queen's passing, during a family lunch at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. The Queen had seemed frail but alert, asking Charlotte about her school subjects and her progress with horseback riding. What Charlotte remembered most clearly was her great-grandmother's advice about dealing with difficult emotions. "Sometimes, my dear," the Queen had said, "we must smile even when our hearts are heavy." It's not about pretending everything is perfect, but about showing strength and grace when others need to see it. At the time, Charlotte hadn't fully understood what her great-grandmother meant, but those words would soon take on new meaning. After the service, the family moved to the castle's private dining room for lunch. The atmosphere was more relaxed as relatives shared memories and stories about Queen Elizabeth II. Charlotte listened to the adults talk about her great-grandmother's sense of humor, her love of horses and dogs, and her remarkable ability to connect with people from all walks of life. Prince Harry spoke about how the Queen had supported him through difficult times, particularly after the death of his mother, Princess Diana. King Charles shared memories of his mother's wisdom during challenging periods of his own life. These personal glimpses of the Queen as a mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother helped Charlotte understand the depth of loss the family was still processing. As the afternoon wore on, Charlotte excused herself to visit the castle gardens. James accompanied her, maintaining a respectful distance as she walked along the familiar paths. The gardens held special significance for Charlotte. This was where she had often played with Queen Elizabeth II's beloved corgi dogs, and where she had learned to appreciate the beauty of nature. Charlotte found herself at the spot where a memorial garden had been planted in the Queen's honor. The carefully tended beds of roses, lavender, and other flowers created a peaceful sanctuary within the castle grounds. She sat on a stone bench that overlooked the garden, feeling the weight of the day's emotions settling over her. James noticed Charlotte's reflective mood and approached carefully. He had learned over the past 2 years that she sometimes needed space to process her feelings, but he also knew when she might benefit from gentle conversation. Charlotte looked up at him with eyes that seemed older than her 9 years. "James," she said softly, "do you think great-grandmama would be proud of how we remembered her today?" Her question revealed the depth of her concern about honoring Queen Elizabeth II's memory appropriately. Even at her young age, Charlotte felt the responsibility of carrying forward her great-grandmother's legacy. James knelt down to Charlotte's level, something he rarely did while on duty, but this moment felt different. He could see that Charlotte was struggling with emotions too complex for most children her age to understand. The pressure of being a young royal, combined with genuine grief for her great-grandmother, was creating a burden that few people could truly comprehend. "Princess Charlotte," James said gently, "I think your great-grandmother would be very proud of the young woman you're becoming. She would see your kindness, your curiosity, and your genuine care for others. Those are the qualities that mattered most to her, not perfect behavior at formal ceremonies." Charlotte considered his words carefully. She had always appreciated James's honest and straightforward way of speaking to her. Unlike some adults who spoke to her differently because of her royal status, James treated her with respect while acknowledging that she was still a child learning to navigate a complicated world. As they prepared to leave Windsor Castle, Charlotte took one last look at the memorial garden. She silently promised her great-grandmother that she would try to live up to the example that had been set for her. She would work to be kind, brave, and dedicated to helping others, just as Queen Elizabeth II had been throughout her remarkable 70-year reign. The journey back to Kensington Palace was quiet, with Charlotte lost in her thoughts about the day's events. She realized that growing up as a member of the royal family meant carrying responsibilities and expectations that most children never faced. While she sometimes envied the freedom of ordinary children, she was also beginning to understand the unique opportunities her position provided to make a positive difference in the world. That evening, as Charlotte prepared for bed, she reflected on the complex emotions the memorial service had stirred up. Grief, responsibility, love, and uncertainty all swirled together in her young heart. She had always been encouraged to express her feelings openly, but today had shown her that sometimes the most important emotions were the ones that remained unspoken. James completed his security checks for the evening and prepared to hand over duties to the night shift. As he said goodnight to Charlotte, he noticed that her usual bright smile seemed somehow different, not absent, but more thoughtful and mature. He made a mental note to keep a closer eye on her emotional well-being in the coming days. Little did James know that this memorial service would mark the beginning of a challenging period for Princess Charlotte. The weight of royal expectations, combined with the normal pressures of growing up, would soon test her resilience in ways that no 9-year-old should have to face. The smile that had always come so naturally to Charlotte would soon become something she had to work much harder to maintain. As Charlotte drifted off to sleep that night, she thought about her great-grandmother's words about showing strength and grace when others needed to see it. She was beginning to understand that being a princess meant much more than wearing beautiful dresses and attending fancy events. It meant carrying the hopes and expectations of an entire nation, even when you were still learning how to carry your own emotional burdens. The memorial service had awakened something in Charlotte, a deeper awareness of her role and responsibilities as a member of the royal family. While this newfound understanding would help her grow into the leader she was destined to become, it would also create pressures and challenges that would test every lesson her great-grandmother had taught her about duty, service, and grace under pressure. James drove home to his own family that evening, thinking about the subtle changes he had observed in Princess Charlotte throughout the day. His training had taught him to notice details that others might miss, and he sensed that Charlotte was entering a new phase of her young life. The carefree childhood that had characterized her first 9 years was gradually giving way to a more complex understanding of her place in the world. As a father himself, James understood the delicate balance between protecting Charlotte's innocence and preparing her for the realities of royal life. His job was to keep her physically safe, but he was beginning to realize that her emotional well-being might require just as much attention and care. The memorial service had been a turning point, marking the end of one chapter in Charlotte's life and the beginning of another that would demand greater maturity and resilience than anyone her age should need to possess. 3 weeks after the memorial service, Charlotte returned to Lanbrook School, the prestigious preparatory school in Berkshire that she attended with her brothers. The school prided itself on providing a nurturing environment for children while maintaining high academic standards. For the Wales children, it offered a chance to experience something closer to a normal education, surrounded by classmates who, while from privileged backgrounds, weren't part of the royal family. Charlotte had always excelled at school. Her teachers praised her natural leadership abilities, her quick wit, and her genuine interest in learning. She particularly enjoyed history lessons, where she would often surprise her teachers with insights that went beyond the curriculum. Charlotte understood that much of the history they studied was actually her family's history, but she tried not to let that knowledge make her feel different from her classmates. However, since the memorial service, Charlotte's teachers began to notice subtle changes in her behavior. Mrs. Sarah Henderson, her Year 4 teacher, observed that Charlotte seemed more withdrawn during class discussions. The girl who had once eagerly raised her hand to answer questions now sat quietly, appearing lost in her own thoughts. During break times, Charlotte would often be found sitting alone under the large oak tree in the school playground, watching her classmates play rather than joining in their games. Her best friend, Isabella Thornton, tried repeatedly to draw Charlotte into their usual activities, but Charlotte would politely decline, claiming she preferred to read or simply observe the world around her. James noticed these changes during his daily school pickups. As Charlotte's protection officer, he had developed a routine of brief conversations with her teachers to ensure her safety and well-being. Mrs. Henderson had mentioned her concerns about Charlotte's increasingly introspective behavior, which aligned with James's own observations. The drive home from school had become particularly telling. Previously, Charlotte would chatter excitedly about her day, sharing stories about lessons, friends, and playground adventures. Now, she would sit quietly in the back seat, staring out the window with an expression that seemed far too serious for a 9-year-old. One afternoon in late October, as autumn leaves danced in the wind outside the car windows, James decided to address Charlotte's changed demeanor directly. He had been thinking about the best way to approach the subject without overstepping his professional boundaries, but his concern for her well-being outweighed his hesitation about protocol. "Princess Charlotte," James said gently, "I've noticed you seem quieter lately. Is there anything troubling you that you'd like to talk about?" He adjusted the rearview mirror so he could see her face while maintaining focus on the road ahead. Charlotte looked up from the book she had been pretending to read. For a moment, she seemed surprised that someone had noticed her internal struggle. In her experience, adults were usually too busy with their own responsibilities to pay attention to the subtle emotional changes of children. "I've been thinking about great-grandmama," Charlotte replied softly. "Not just missing her, but thinking about what she said about showing strength when others need to see it. I don't think I understand what that really means." James recognized the weight behind Charlotte's words. Queen Elizabeth II had been renowned for her ability to maintain composure and dignity during the most challenging moments of her reign. For a 9-year-old to grapple with such concepts showed remarkable maturity, but also suggested she was placing unnecessary pressure on herself. "What do you think it means?" James asked, employing a technique he often used with his own daughter when she was working through difficult concepts. Charlotte considered the question carefully before responding. "I think it means that even when I'm sad or confused or scared, I need to smile and act like everything is fine because people expect princesses to be happy all the time. But it's getting harder to do that, James. Sometimes I don't feel like smiling, but everyone always wants to see Princess Charlotte smile." The profound sadness in her voice struck James deeply. He realized that Charlotte was beginning to understand one of the most challenging aspects of royal life: the expectation to maintain a public persona that might not always align with private emotions. This was a burden that most adults struggled with, let alone a child who should be free to express her feelings openly. "Princess Charlotte," James said, pulling the car over to a safe spot along their route home, "I think your great-grandmother would want you to know that showing strength doesn't mean hiding your true feelings. It means being honest about your emotions while still treating others with kindness and respect." Charlotte unbuckled her seatbelt and leaned forward, eager to hear more of James's perspective. She had always valued his straightforward approach to difficult topics, and she sensed that he understood her struggle in a way that others might not. "When I was deployed overseas with the military," James continued, "I learned that the strongest soldiers weren't the ones who never felt afraid or sad. They were the ones who acknowledged their feelings but didn't let those emotions prevent them from doing what needed to be done. Your great-grandmother faced many difficult situations during her reign, but her strength came from her ability to balance her private emotions with her public responsibilities." Charlotte absorbed this explanation, finding comfort in the idea that strength and vulnerability weren't mutually exclusive. She had been interpreting her great-grandmother's advice as a requirement to suppress her true feelings, when perhaps the message had been more nuanced. "But what if people are disappointed when they see that I'm not always happy?" Charlotte asked. "What if they think I'm not grateful for my life, or that I don't appreciate being a princess?" James could hear the genuine anxiety in Charlotte's voice. At 9 years old, she was already worrying about public perception and the expectations placed on members of the royal family. This level of self-awareness and concern was both impressive and heartbreaking. "People who truly care about you will want to see the real Princess Charlotte," James assured her. "That includes your happy moments and your sad moments, your confident days and your uncertain ones. Anyone who expects you to be perfect all the time doesn't understand that being human means experiencing the full range of emotions." As they continued their journey home, Charlotte felt a small measure of relief at having shared her concerns with James. She had been carrying these thoughts alone for weeks, not wanting to burden her parents with additional worries or disappoint her teachers with her changed behavior. That evening, Charlotte joined her family for dinner in the private dining room at Kensington Palace. Prince William and Catherine had established a tradition of family dinners without staff present, creating a space where their children could speak freely about their experiences and concerns. George, now 11 and increasingly aware of his future role as king, was discussing his recent history project about medieval monarchs. Louis, at 6 years old, entertained the family with stories about his latest adventures at school, including a playground incident involving a escaped hamster from the school's nature corner. Charlotte listened to her brother's animated conversations while picking at her food. Catherine noticed her daughter's lack of appetite and quieter demeanor, recognizing signs that Charlotte might need some individual attention. After dinner, Catherine invited Charlotte to join her for their evening walk around the palace gardens. This had been a special tradition between mother and daughter since Charlotte was very young, providing opportunities for private conversations away from the formalities of royal protocol. As they strolled along the garden paths, Catherine gently inquired about Charlotte's school day and her general well-being. Charlotte had always been open with her mother about her feelings and experiences, but tonight she seemed hesitant to share what was troubling her. "Mummy," Charlotte said eventually, "did you ever feel confused about being a princess when you were growing up?" Catherine smiled at the question, remembering her own adjustment to royal life after marrying Prince William. While she hadn't grown up as a member of the royal family, she understood the challenges of adapting to public expectations and protocol. "I didn't become a princess until I was much older than you are now," Catherine replied. "But I certainly felt confused and sometimes overwhelmed by the expectations and responsibilities. It's natural to have questions about your role and how you fit into the family's traditions." Charlotte felt encouraged by her mother's understanding response. She had worried that expressing uncertainty about royal life might disappoint her parents or suggest that she was ungrateful for her privileged position. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to be a normal girl," Charlotte admitted. "Not because I don't love our family or appreciate what we have, but because it seems like it might be easier to just be myself without worrying about what everyone expects." Catherine recognized the depth of Charlotte's internal struggle. At 9 years old, her daughter was grappling with questions of identity and purpose that many people didn't face until much later in life. The challenge of balancing personal desires with public expectations was particularly acute for members of the royal family. "Being part of this family does come with unique challenges," Catherine acknowledged. "But it also provides opportunities to make a real difference in people's lives. Your great-grandmother often spoke about finding purpose in service to others, and I think that's part of what she meant about showing strength when others need to see it." Charlotte considered her mother's words, beginning to understand that royal responsibility wasn't just about maintaining appearances, but about using her position to help others. This perspective hadn't occurred to her before, and it offered a new way of thinking about her role. Over the following days, Charlotte began to observe her parents more carefully, paying attention to how they balanced their public duties with their private lives. She watched as her father attended charity events, met with government officials, and participated in ceremonial functions, always maintaining dignity and composure regardless of his personal feelings about each situation. She also observed her mother's interactions with the public during official engagements, noting how Catherine could connect genuinely with people from all backgrounds while maintaining appropriate royal protocol. Charlotte began to see that authenticity and duty weren't necessarily contradictory. James noticed a gradual shift in Charlotte's demeanor during their daily school commutes. While she remained more thoughtful and introspective than she had been before the memorial service, she seemed less burdened by the weight of her concerns. Her questions became more focused on understanding her role rather than feeling overwhelmed by it. "James," Charlotte said one morning as they drove to school, "do you think great-grandmama ever felt scared or uncertain when she was young?" "I'm sure she did," James replied. "She became queen when she was only 25 years old, much younger than your parents are now. She had to learn how to balance her personal feelings with her public responsibilities, just like you're learning to do." Charlotte found comfort in imagining her great-grandmother as a young woman facing similar uncertainties. It made the queen seem more human and relatable, rather than the perfect figure Charlotte had been trying to emulate. At school, Mrs. Henderson noticed that Charlotte was beginning to participate more actively in class discussions, though her contributions were often more thoughtful and mature than those of her classmates. During a history lesson about social change, Charlotte raised her hand to ask about how individuals could make a difference in their communities. "Sometimes one person's actions can inspire many others to work toward positive change," Mrs. Henderson explained. Leaders throughout history have shown that individual courage and commitment can have far-reaching effects. Charlotte absorbed this lesson with particular interest, beginning to see how her position as a princess might provide opportunities to inspire others rather than simply meet expectations. This shift in perspective was gradually transforming her understanding of royal responsibility from a burden into a potential tool for positive impact. During break time, Charlotte rejoined her classmates' activities for the first time in weeks. Isabella was delighted to have her best friend's full attention again, though she noticed that Charlotte's approach to their games had become more thoughtful and inclusive. Charlotte now made an effort to invite quieter children to join their activities, and showed particular kindness to classmates who seemed to be struggling with their own challenges. James observed these positive changes with relief and pride. Charlotte was developing emotional resilience and empathy that would serve her well throughout her life. Rather than simply suppressing her concerns, she was learning to transform them into motivation for personal growth and service to others. As autumn progressed toward winter, Charlotte's smile began to return, though it was different from the carefree expression she had worn before the memorial service. Her new smile reflected deeper understanding, compassion, and purpose. She was learning that growing up meant accepting complexity rather than seeking simple answers to life's challenges. The transformation wasn't complete. Charlotte still had moments of uncertainty and sadness, but she was developing the tools to process these emotions constructively. She understood that her great-grandmother's advice about showing strength wasn't about hiding her true self, but about channeling her experiences into positive action for others. James recognized that Charlotte was entering a new phase of development, one that would require continued support and understanding from the adults in her life. Her journey toward understanding her role as a princess was just beginning, and there would undoubtedly be more challenges ahead. However, the foundation of resilience and empathy she was building would serve her well in the years to come. As November brought shorter days and colder weather to London, Princess Charlotte found herself facing an unexpected challenge that would test everything she had learned about balancing personal feelings with public expectations. The royal family's annual Christmas preparations were beginning, and with them came a series of public engagements that would put Charlotte in the spotlight during a time when she was still working through her evolving understanding of her royal role. The first major event was the Christmas tree lighting ceremony at Covent Garden, a beloved London tradition that had become associated with the royal family's holiday season. This year, Charlotte would join her parents and brothers for the public celebration, marking one of her most prominent appearances since the memorial service for Queen Elizabeth II. Catherine had carefully selected Charlotte's outfit for the occasion, a deep green coat with gold buttons that complemented the festive atmosphere while maintaining the appropriate level of formality for a royal engagement. As Charlotte stood before her bedroom mirror on the morning of the event, she practiced the smile she would need to maintain throughout the public appearance. James arrived early that morning to review security arrangements and brief Charlotte on the event schedule. He had noticed that Charlotte seemed more anxious than usual about public appearances lately, and he wanted to ensure she felt prepared and supported throughout the day. "Princess Charlotte," James said as they reviewed the timeline, "remember that the people who come to see you at these events are genuinely excited to meet you. They're not expecting perfection. They just want to share in the joy of the season with your family." Charlotte nodded, but James could see the tension in her shoulders and the way she kept smoothing down her dress. The confidence that had once come naturally to her now required more conscious effort. And James recognized the signs of a child trying hard to meet adult expectations. The journey to Covent Garden took them through London's bustling streets, decorated with Christmas lights and filled with shoppers preparing for the holiday season. Charlotte watched the crowds through the car window, observing families walking together, children pressing their faces against shop windows, and couples sharing warm drinks from street vendors. "Do you think they're all happy?" Charlotte asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence in the car. James considered her question carefully, understanding that she was grappling with larger concepts about human nature and the complexities of emotions. "I think most people have moments of happiness and moments of sadness just like you do. The important thing is that they have people who care about them and experiences that bring them joy." Charlotte absorbed this response, finding comfort in the idea that everyone, not just members of the royal family, dealt with complex emotions. She had begun to realize that her struggles with balancing public and private feelings weren't unique to her position as a princess. As they arrived at Covent Garden, Charlotte could hear the excited chatter of the crowd that had gathered for the ceremony. Hundreds of people, including many families with young children, had come to witness the royal family's participation in the Christmas tree lighting. The atmosphere was festive and warm despite the cold December air. Charlotte took a deep breath as she stepped out of the car, immediately hearing calls of Princess Charlotte from the crowd. She waved and smiled, drawing on the lessons her parents had taught her about engaging with the public while maintaining appropriate boundaries. The ceremony began with a brief welcome from the Lord Mayor of London, followed by performances from a local children's choir. Charlotte found herself genuinely enjoying the music, and her smile became more natural as she listened to the young voices singing traditional Christmas carols. When it came time for the actual tree lighting, Prince William invited Charlotte to help him flip the ceremonial switch. As the massive Christmas tree illuminated the square with thousands of twinkling lights, the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Charlotte felt a genuine surge of joy at being part of this moment of collective celebration. However, as the formal ceremony concluded, and the royal family began their traditional walkabout to meet members of the public, Charlotte's anxiety returned. She had always enjoyed meeting people during royal engagements, but lately, she felt the pressure of representing her family and country more acutely. The first family they encountered included a little girl about Charlotte's age named Emma, who was clearly nervous but excited to meet a real princess. Emma's mother had coached her on the proper way to greet Charlotte, and the young girl managed a perfect curtsy while her hands shook with excitement. "Hello, Emma," Charlotte said warmly, kneeling down to the girl's level. "What's your favorite Christmas tradition?" Emma's face lit up as she began talking about her family's annual Christmas Eve treasure hunt, where her parents hid clues throughout their house leading to small gifts and treats. Charlotte listened with genuine interest, finding herself drawn into Emma's enthusiasm for the holiday season. As they talked, Charlotte noticed that Emma's excitement wasn't about meeting royalty specifically. It was about sharing her joy for Christmas with someone who seemed interested in listening. This realization helped Charlotte understand that her role in these public engagements wasn't to be perfect, but to be present and genuine in her interactions with others. The walkabout continued for another hour, with Charlotte meeting dozens of families and individuals who had come to witness the ceremony. Each interaction taught her something new about connecting with people authentically while maintaining the dignity expected of her position. James observed Charlotte throughout the event, noting the moments when her smile was genuine versus when she was working harder to maintain her composure. He could see her growing confidence as the afternoon progressed, and he was proud of how she was learning to balance her personal feelings with her public responsibilities. On the journey home, Charlotte was unusually quiet, but James sensed it was a contemplative silence rather than the worried introspection he had observed in previous weeks. She seemed to be processing the day's experiences and what they had taught her about her role as a princess. "James," Charlotte said as they neared Kensington Palace, "I think I'm beginning to understand what great-grandmama meant about showing strength. It's not about pretending to be someone else. It's about being the best version of yourself when others need you to be." James smiled at Charlotte's insight, recognizing the maturity and wisdom in her words. She was learning one of the most important lessons of royal life, that authenticity and duty could coexist when approached with the right mindset. That evening, Charlotte joined her family for dinner and enthusiastically shared her experiences from the Christmas tree lighting ceremony. She talked about the people she had met, the performances she had enjoyed, and the feeling of being part of something larger than herself. Prince William and Catherine exchanged pleased glances, recognizing that Charlotte was working through her earlier struggles with royal expectations in a healthy and constructive way. They had been concerned about her withdrawn behavior following the memorial service, but tonight she seemed more like her spirited self, while retaining the deeper understanding she had gained through her period of reflection. The next major event on Charlotte's schedule was the annual Christmas carol service at Westminster Abbey, an occasion that would require her to sit still for an extended period while maintaining appropriate behavior in one of Britain's most sacred spaces. This type of formal ceremony had always been challenging for Charlotte, who preferred active engagement to passive observation. In the days leading up to the carol service, Charlotte worked with her parents and private tutors to understand the historical significance of Westminster Abbey and the importance of the Christmas traditions they would be participating in. She learned about the Abbey's role in British history, from royal coronations to state funerals, and began to appreciate her family's connection to this sacred space. Catherine took particular care in preparing Charlotte for the carol service, recognizing that her daughter was still developing her understanding of royal protocol and public behavior. They practiced sitting gracefully for extended periods, discussed appropriate responses to various parts of the service, and talked about the meaning behind the Christmas carols they would hear. "Mummy," Charlotte asked during one of their preparation sessions, "why is it so important that we sit perfectly still during the service? Wouldn't God want us to be comfortable and natural?" Catherine appreciated the thoughtfulness behind Charlotte's question and took time to explain the balance between personal comfort and public respectfulness. "When we attend these ceremonies, we're representing not just our family but our country. Our behavior shows respect for the traditions and the people who look to us as examples." Charlotte nodded, beginning to understand that royal protocol wasn't arbitrary but served important purposes in maintaining dignity and respect during significant occasions. She was learning to see formal behavior not as a restriction but as a way of honoring the importance of ceremonial events. On the day of the carol service, Charlotte felt more prepared and confident than she had for the Christmas tree lighting ceremony. She had developed strategies for maintaining focus during long ceremonies, including mentally reviewing the historical significance of the abbey and the meaning behind each carol they would hear. The abbey was magnificently decorated for Christmas, with towering arrangements of evergreen branches, white flowers, and golden ribbons adorning the ancient stone columns. Hundreds of candles provided warm, flickering light that created an atmosphere of reverence and celebration. As Charlotte walked down the abbey's central aisle with her family, she felt the weight of history surrounding her. This was where her grandfather had been crowned, where royal weddings had been celebrated, and where the nation had gathered to mark significant moments in British history. She was part of a tradition that stretched back more than 1,000 years. The service included performances by the Abbey's renowned choir, readings from prominent British figures, and the singing of beloved Christmas carols by the entire congregation. Charlotte found herself genuinely moved by the beauty of the music and the solemnity of the occasion. During a particularly moving rendition of Silent Night, Charlotte noticed tears in the eyes of several congregation members. She realized that this ceremony wasn't just about royal tradition. It was about bringing people together to celebrate hope, peace, and the promise of renewal that Christmas represented. James, positioned discreetly near the royal family's seating area, observed Charlotte throughout the service. He could see her genuine engagement with the ceremony and her growing comfort with formal royal occasions. The anxious girl who had struggled with public expectations was developing into a young woman who understood how to balance personal authenticity with public responsibility. Following the carol service, the royal family attended a private reception with clergy and distinguished guests. Charlotte had the opportunity to speak with the Archbishop of Canterbury, who was impressed by her thoughtful questions about the role of the Church in British society and the importance of Christmas traditions. "Your Royal Highness asks very profound questions for someone so young," the Archbishop told Charlotte. "I can see that you're thinking deeply about your role and the responsibilities that come with it." Charlotte felt a surge of pride at the Archbishop's words, realizing that her period of introspection and questioning hadn't been a sign of weakness, but evidence of her growing maturity and understanding. She was learning that asking difficult questions was an important part of developing wisdom and character. As December progressed toward Christmas, Charlotte participated in several smaller royal engagements, including visits to children's hospitals and charity organizations. These events allowed her to see firsthand how her position could be used to bring joy and comfort to others, particularly those facing difficult circumstances. During a visit to Great Ormond Street Hospital, Charlotte met children who were spending Christmas away from home due to serious illnesses. She was struck by their resilience and positive attitudes despite their challenging situations. Many of the young patients seemed more concerned about making Charlotte feel comfortable than dwelling on their own difficulties. One patient, a 7-year-old boy named Thomas who was recovering from heart surgery, asked Charlotte about her favorite Christmas traditions. As she described her family's Christmas Eve gift exchange and Christmas morning church service, Charlotte realized how fortunate she was to have these experiences with people she loved. "Do you ever get scared about being a princess?" Thomas asked with the directness that only children possess. Charlotte considered his question carefully before answering. "Sometimes I do feel scared or uncertain, but I've learned that it's okay to have those feelings as long as I don't let them stop me from trying to help others." Thomas nodded sagely as if her answer made perfect sense to him. "My mummy says being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what you need to do even when you are scared." Charlotte was struck by the wisdom in Thomas's words, recognizing a truth that aligned perfectly with what she had been learning about courage and leadership. This young boy, facing his own significant challenges, had offered her insight that was both simple and profound. The hospital visit marked another turning point in Charlotte's understanding of her role as a princess. She began to see that her position wasn't primarily about maintaining perfect public appearances, but about using her platform to connect with others and provide encouragement during difficult times. James observed the transformation in Charlotte's approach to royal duties with satisfaction and pride. The withdrawn, anxious girl he had been worried about was developing into a young woman with genuine empathy, resilience, and a clear sense of purpose. Her smile, which had seemed forced and artificial for several weeks, was becoming natural and authentic again. As Christmas approached, Charlotte felt more confident about her role in upcoming holiday celebrations and public appearances. She had learned that authenticity and royal responsibility could coexist when approached with the right understanding and intentions. The lessons her great-grandmother had taught her about showing strength when others needed to see it were finally beginning to make sense in a practical, meaningful way. The week before Christmas brought an unexpected crisis that would test Charlotte's newfound understanding of royal responsibility in ways she had never imagined. On a gray Tuesday morning in mid-December, as London was blanketed with the season's first significant snowfall, James arrived at Kensington Palace to find the household in a state of quiet urgency. Catherine had fallen seriously ill during the night with what doctors initially diagnosed as severe flu, though they suspected it might develop into pneumonia. She had been rushed to a private hospital for treatment, leaving the Wales family Christmas preparations in disarray. Prince William needed to balance his time between supporting his wife, maintaining his royal duties, and caring for their 3 children. Charlotte sensed the tension in the palace atmosphere immediately. The usual cheerful bustle of Christmas preparations had been replaced by hushed conversations between staff members and the controlled concern that adults tried to hide from children during family crises. When Charlotte asked about her mother's absence from breakfast, William explained the situation with careful honesty appropriate for a 9-year-old. "Mummy is very poorly and needs to rest in the hospital for a few days," William told Charlotte, George, and Louis as they sat together in the family sitting room. "The doctors are taking excellent care of her, and she wants us to continue with our Christmas plans while she gets better." Charlotte's immediate reaction was worry and confusion. Her mother had seemed fine the previous evening when they had reviewed Charlotte's schedule for the week, which included several public appearances and charitable visits. The sudden change was frightening and disorienting for a child who had come to rely on her mother's steady presence and guidance. James observed Charlotte's response to the news with particular attention. Over the past few months, he had watched her develop greater emotional maturity and resilience, but this situation would challenge those new capabilities in unexpected ways. A family crisis combined with continued royal obligations would test Charlotte's ability to balance personal concerns with public responsibilities. The most immediate challenge was a scheduled visit to a local primary school that afternoon, where Charlotte was meant to help distribute Christmas gifts to underprivileged children. The event had been planned for weeks, and dozens of families were expecting to meet Princess Charlotte. Canceling would disappoint many people, but asking a 9-year-old to maintain public composure while worried about her mother seemed unreasonable. William discussed the situation with his private secretary and security team, ultimately deciding that Charlotte should have the choice whether to proceed with the school visit. At 9 years old, she was developing the judgment necessary to make such decisions, and involving her in the choice would help her learn about balancing personal and public considerations. When William presented the option to Charlotte, she sat quietly for several minutes, clearly weighing the competing demands on her emotions and attention. James watched her thinking process with admiration, recognizing the maturity she was demonstrating in considering all aspects of the situation. "Daddy," Charlotte said eventually, "would the children at the school be very disappointed if I didn't come? And would it be possible for me to visit Mummy at the hospital afterward?" William explained that while the children would certainly be disappointed, they would understand if Charlotte needed to be with her family. However, if Charlotte chose to proceed with the school visit, they could arrange for her to see Catherine later in the evening when visiting hours permitted. Charlotte made her decision with characteristic thoughtfulness. "I think great-grandmama would want me to visit the children first, because they've been looking forward to it, and some of them might not have many other special things happening for Christmas. But I want to see Mummy as soon as possible afterward." James felt a surge of pride at Charlotte's reasoning. She was applying the lessons she had learned about royal duty and service to others while acknowledging her personal needs and concerns. This balance represented significant growth from the confused and overwhelmed girl she had been just a few months earlier. The preparation for the school visit took on different significance given Catherine's absence. Usually, Catherine would help Charlotte review details about the event, practice conversations with the children, and ensure Charlotte felt confident about her role. Today, William took on these responsibilities while managing his own worry about his wife. Charlotte's outfit had been selected and pressed the previous day. A cheerful red dress with a white cardigan that struck the right balance between festive and appropriate for a primary school setting. As Charlotte dressed for the event, she found herself thinking about her mother's advice regarding public appearances and trying to channel Catherine's calm, warm approach to meeting children. James arrived to escort Charlotte to the school with mixed feelings about the day ahead. His primary responsibility was her physical safety, but he had come to care deeply about her emotional well-being as well. Today would require him to watch carefully for signs that Charlotte might be struggling to maintain composure while dealing with personal anxiety. The drive to the school took them through London neighborhoods decorated for Christmas, with shop windows displaying festive scenes and streets lined with twinkling lights. Charlotte watched the familiar sights with less enthusiasm than usual. Her mind clearly focused on concerns about her mother's condition and the responsibilities she was about to undertake. "Princess Charlotte," James said gently, "it's perfectly normal to feel worried about your mother and nervous about the school visit at the same time. You don't have to pretend that everything is fine. You just need to do your best with the children and be kind to yourself about whatever emotions you're experiencing." Charlotte appreciated James's understanding and permission to feel multiple emotions simultaneously. She had been trying to compartmentalize her worry about Catherine so she could focus on the school visit, but James's words helped her realize that acknowledging her concerns might actually make her more authentic in her interactions with the children. Millfield Primary School had prepared extensively for Princess Charlotte's visit. The headmaster, Mr. David Collins, had worked with his staff to ensure the event would be meaningful for their students, while maintaining appropriate protocol for hosting a member of the royal family. Many of the children came from low-income families, and this visit represented a highlight of their school year. As Charlotte's car pulled up to the school entrance, she could see dozens of excited faces pressed against classroom windows and hear the excited chatter of children who had been waiting for hours to meet a real princess. Their enthusiasm was infectious, and Charlotte felt her spirits lift slightly despite her underlying worry about her mother. The school had arranged for Charlotte to visit several classrooms, help distribute Christmas gifts to students, and participate in a brief Christmas concert performed by the school choir. The schedule was designed to give many children the opportunity to meet Charlotte, while avoiding overwhelming her with too many activities. Charlotte's first stop was a reception classroom where 5- and 6-year-olds were creating Christmas cards for their families. The teacher, Miss Johnson, had prepared the children by explaining how to greet Princess Charlotte properly, but their excitement made formal protocol challenging to maintain. "Are you really a princess?" asked a little girl named Amira, her eyes wide with wonder as Charlotte knelt beside her desk to admire her Christmas card artwork. "Yes, I am," Charlotte replied with a genuine smile. "But I'm also a girl just like you, who goes to school and has to do homework, and sometimes gets nervous about new things." Charlotte's honest response seemed to delight the children, who began peppering her with questions about princess life, royal palaces, and whether she really wore a crown to dinner. Charlotte answered their questions with patience and humor, finding that their innocent curiosity was helping distract her from her worries about Catherine. As Charlotte moved through the school, she met children from various backgrounds and circumstances. Some lived in temporary housing, others had parents working multiple jobs to make ends meet, and several were spending Christmas in foster care. Despite their challenging situations, the children displayed remarkable resilience and joy, particularly in anticipation of the holiday season. In one classroom, Charlotte met a 9-year-old boy named Marcus, who had been living in foster care for over a year. Marcus was initially shy around Charlotte, but when she asked about his interests, he excitedly told her about his love of reading and his dream of becoming a writer someday. "What kind of stories do you like to write?" Charlotte asked, sitting beside Marcus at his desk. "I write about kids who go on adventures and help other people," Marcus explained. "My foster mom says that stories can help people feel less alone when they're sad or scared." Charlotte was struck by Marcus's wisdom and insight. Here was a child who had faced significant upheaval in his young life, but had found a way to channel his experiences into creativity and hope for others. His perspective reminded her of the lessons she had been learning about transforming difficult emotions into positive action. The Christmas concert performed by the school choir was particularly moving. The children sang traditional carols and contemporary Christmas songs with enthusiasm that more than compensated for any technical imperfections in their performance. Charlotte found herself genuinely touched by their joy and effort, temporarily forgetting her concerns about her mother's condition. During the gift distribution, Charlotte helped hand out presents to each child in the school. The gifts were modest: books, art supplies, and small toys. But the children's excitement and gratitude were overwhelming. Charlotte realized that her presence was making these simple gifts feel more special and meaningful to the recipients. One little girl named Sophie, who had been particularly excited to meet Charlotte, shyly approached with a handmade Christmas card. "This is for your mummy," Sophie said. "My teacher told us she's poorly, and I made this to help her feel better." Charlotte felt tears welling up in her eyes as she accepted Sophie's thoughtful gift. The simple kindness from a 6-year-old stranger touched her deeply and reminded her that even in difficult times, there were reasons to feel hopeful and grateful. James observed Charlotte's interactions throughout the school visit with growing admiration. Despite her personal concerns, she was fully present with each child she met, showing genuine interest in their stories and enthusiasm for their achievements. Her ability to compartmentalize her worries without suppressing them entirely demonstrated remarkable emotional intelligence for someone her age. As the visit concluded, Charlotte addressed the entire school in a brief assembly. Standing at the front of the packed gymnasium, she looked out at hundreds of eager young faces and found herself thinking about what message would be most meaningful to share. "Thank you all for such a wonderful welcome," Charlotte began. "Meeting each of you today has reminded me that Christmas is about much more than presents and decorations. It's about kindness, generosity, and caring for one another, especially when times are difficult. You have all shown me those qualities today, and I'm grateful to have spent this time with you." The children erupted in applause and cheers, clearly pleased that their royal visitor had enjoyed her time with them. Several teachers wiped away tears, moved by Charlotte's heartfelt words and the obvious connection she had made with their students. On the journey back to Kensington Palace, Charlotte was quiet, but not withdrawn. James could see that she was processing the day's experiences and their significance in the context of her family situation and her growing understanding of royal responsibility. "How are you feeling about today?" James asked gently. "Sad about Mummy, but also grateful," Charlotte replied thoughtfully. "Those children helped me remember that there are always people dealing with much bigger problems than mine, and that even small acts of kindness can make a real difference in someone's day." James recognized the maturity and empathy in Charlotte's response. She was learning to hold multiple emotions simultaneously: worry about her mother, satisfaction at having fulfilled her royal duties, gratitude for the children's warmth, and a deeper understanding of her role in bringing joy to others during difficult times. That evening, Charlotte was able to visit Catherine in the hospital. Seeing her mother looking pale and tired in the hospital bed was frightening, but Catherine managed to smile and express pride in Charlotte's decision to proceed with the school visit despite the family crisis. "Sophie made this card for you," Charlotte said, presenting the handmade Christmas card from the little girl at Millfield Primary School. "She wanted to help you feel better." Catherine was deeply moved by the gesture and by Charlotte's thoughtfulness in sharing it. "This is the most beautiful Christmas card I've ever received," she told Charlotte. "Thank you for bringing me such a special gift, and thank you for being so brave and kind today." As Charlotte prepared to leave the hospital, she realized that the day had taught her something important about the nature of strength and service. She had discovered that royal duty didn't require her to ignore her personal concerns, but rather to channel those concerns into greater empathy and connection with others. Her worry about Catherine had actually enhanced her ability to relate to the children at the school, many of whom were dealing with their own family challenges. James drove Charlotte home through London's Christmas-lit streets, both of them reflecting on a day that had tested and strengthened Charlotte's understanding of her role as a princess. She had faced her first real crisis as a member of the royal family and had responded with maturity, compassion, and grace that would have made Queen Elizabeth II proud. The experience had shown Charlotte that being a princess wasn't about maintaining a perfect facade, but about using her position to bring comfort and joy to others, especially during difficult times. Her great-grandmother's lessons about showing strength when others needed to see it were finally making complete sense. Strength came not from hiding vulnerability, but from transforming it into service and connection with others. Christmas Eve arrived at Kensington Palace with a mixture of joy and quiet concern that perfectly captured the complexity Charlotte had learned to navigate over the past few months. Catherine had returned home from the hospital 2 days earlier, still weak but recovering steadily. The family's Christmas celebrations would be more subdued than usual, but the opportunity to be together felt more precious because of the recent scare. Charlotte woke early on Christmas Eve morning, as had been her tradition since childhood. However, this year her excitement was tempered with a deeper appreciation for the significance of family gatherings and the privilege of good health. She found herself thinking about the children she had met at Millfield Primary School and wondering how they were spending their Christmas Eve. James arrived at his usual time to begin his daily protection duties, but Christmas Eve schedules were always different from ordinary days. The royal family would attend morning service at St. James's Palace, followed by the traditional Christmas Eve lunch with extended family members, and conclude with their private gift exchange in the evening. As Charlotte prepared for the morning service, she chose her outfit with more consideration than she had given such decisions in the past. She selected a deep blue dress with silver buttons that felt appropriately festive but not overly elaborate. The months of learning to balance personal expression with royal expectations had taught her to think carefully about the messages her appearance might convey. Catherine joined the family for breakfast, moving slowly but determinedly. Her illness had reminded everyone of the fragility that exists even in the most privileged circumstances. Charlotte noticed how her mother's vulnerability had brought the family closer together, creating moments of tenderness and gratitude that might have been overlooked during ordinary times. "How are you feeling, Mummy?" Charlotte asked as they shared breakfast in the family dining room. "Much better, darling," Catherine replied, reaching over to squeeze Charlotte's hand. "And so proud of how you handled everything while I was in hospital. The headmaster at Millfield Primary School sent the most wonderful letter describing your visit with the children." Charlotte felt a warm glow of satisfaction at her mother's praise. The school visit had been challenging, requiring her to manage personal worry while fulfilling public responsibilities, but she had discovered capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. The experience had marked a turning point in her understanding of what it meant to serve others while remaining true to herself. The morning service at St. James's Palace was a smaller, more intimate gathering than the large public ceremonies Charlotte had attended earlier in the month. The chapel was filled with extended family members, close friends, and senior palace staff who had become like family over the years of loyal service. During the service, Charlotte found herself thinking about the journey she had taken since Queen Elizabeth II's memorial service just a few months earlier. The confused and overwhelmed girl who had struggled with royal expectations had grown into someone who understood that authenticity and duty could complement each other rather than compete. James sat in his usual position near the family, observing Charlotte's composed but genuine participation in the service. He had watched her transformation with professional satisfaction and personal affection. The anxious child who had questioned every smile and worried about disappointing others had developed into a young woman who could balance multiple responsibilities while maintaining her essential warmth and spontaneity. Following the service, the extended royal family gathered for their traditional Christmas Eve lunch at Buckingham Palace. This was always one of Charlotte's favorite royal occasions because it felt more like a large family gathering than a formal state function. Cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends created a lively atmosphere that reminded Charlotte of the personal relationships that existed behind the public facade of royal life. During lunch, Charlotte found herself in conversation with her great-aunt, Princess Anne, who had always been known for her direct communication style and no-nonsense approach to royal duties. Princess Anne had watched Charlotte's recent development with interest and approval. "I understand you've been asking some thoughtful questions about royal responsibility lately," Princess Anne said as they shared dessert. "That's exactly what you should be doing at your age. The best members of this family are the ones who think carefully about their role rather than simply accepting it without question." Charlotte appreciated her great-aunt's encouragement and felt comfortable sharing some of her recent insights. "I used to think being a princess meant always being perfect and making everyone happy. But I've learned that it's more about being genuine and trying to help others even when things are difficult." Princess Anne smiled at Charlotte's response, recognizing wisdom that had taken her much longer to develop. "Your great-grandmother would be very proud of that understanding. She always said that the monarchy's strength came from serving others rather than being served by them." These words resonated deeply with Charlotte, connecting her recent experiences with the broader legacy of royal service that she was inheriting. She was beginning to see her role not as a burden of expectations, but as an opportunity to continue traditions of service and connection that had sustained the monarchy for generations. After lunch, Charlotte had some free time before the evening gift exchange. She chose to spend this time writing thank you notes to the children at Millfield Primary School, a task she had been wanting to complete since her visit. Each note was personalized with specific references to her conversations with individual students. To Marcus, the aspiring writer, she wrote, "Thank you for telling me about your stories. I hope you continue writing about characters who help others. The world needs more stories like that." To Sophie, who had made the card for Catherine, she wrote, "Your Christmas card was the most beautiful gift my mummy received while she was poorly. Your kindness made such a difference during a difficult time." James found Charlotte at the writing desk in the palace library, surrounded by dozens of handwritten notes. He was struck by her commitment to maintaining personal connections with the children she had met, understanding that this follow-up contact would mean as much to them as the original visit. "That's a lot of thank you notes," James observed. "The children will be thrilled to receive personal messages from you." "I keep thinking about what they taught me," Charlotte replied, continuing to write. "Some of them are dealing with much bigger problems than I was worried about, but they were still so excited and happy. They helped me understand that you can have difficult feelings and still find reasons to smile genuinely." James recognized the profound lesson Charlotte had learned from her interaction with the school children. She had discovered that authentic joy could coexist with genuine concerns, and that serving others often provided the perspective necessary to manage personal challenges. As evening approached, the Wales family gathered in their private sitting room at Kensington Palace for their traditional Christmas Eve gift exchange. This was always Charlotte's favorite part of Christmas, an intimate family moment away from public obligations and formal protocols. The sitting room was decorated with a smaller Christmas tree that Charlotte and her brothers had decorated themselves, along with handmade ornaments created over the years and carefully preserved by Catherine. The atmosphere was warm and relaxed, with a crackling fire and soft Christmas music creating the perfect backdrop for family time. Charlotte had carefully selected gifts for each family member, putting thought into choices that reflected her growing understanding of their individual personalities and needs. For Catherine, still recovering from her illness, Charlotte had chosen a beautiful journal bound in soft leather, thinking her mother might enjoy recording thoughts and reflections during her convalescence. "This is perfect, darling," Catherine said as she examined the journal. "I've been wanting to write down some thoughts about recent experiences, and this will be ideal for that purpose." For William, Charlotte had selected a book about the history of royal service to the nation, recognizing her father's deep interest in understanding the monarchy's role in modern society. William was clearly touched by the thoughtfulness behind Charlotte's choice. "You've chosen something that shows you understand what's important to me," William told Charlotte. "That means more than you might realize." When it came time for Charlotte to open her gifts, she was surprised to discover that her parents had collaborated on something particularly meaningful. Along with the usual books, clothes, and small treasures, they presented her with a framed letter from Queen Elizabeth II, written to Charlotte shortly before the Queen's death. The letter, in the Queen's distinctive handwriting, read, "My dearest Charlotte, as you grow into the remarkable young woman I know you will become, remember that true strength comes from kindness, wisdom from questioning, and joy from serving others. Your smile lights up rooms not because it's perfect, but because it's genuine. Never lose that authenticity, even as you learn to balance personal feelings with public responsibilities. With all my love, great-grandmama." Charlotte held the letter with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face as she absorbed her great-grandmother's final advice. The words perfectly captured everything she had been learning over the past few months about authenticity, service, and the balance between personal and public life. James, who had been invited to observe the family gift exchange as a gesture of appreciation for his dedication to Charlotte's care, watched this moment with deep emotion. He could see how profoundly the Queen's letter affected Charlotte, and how it validated the journey of growth and understanding she had undertaken. "She knew exactly what I needed to hear," Charlotte said through her tears. "Great-grandmama understood that I was going to struggle with these questions, and she wanted to help me find the answers." The letter became the centerpiece of Charlotte's understanding of her role as a princess. Queen Elizabeth II had anticipated the challenges Charlotte would face, and had provided guidance that would serve her throughout her life. The advice about balancing authenticity with responsibility perfectly captured the lessons Charlotte had been learning through her own experiences. Later that evening, as the family prepared for bed on Christmas Eve, Charlotte found a quiet moment to speak with James about the significance of the day and the recent months of growth and learning. "James," Charlotte said, I want to thank you for helping me understand that it's okay to have questions and difficult feelings. You never made me feel like I was wrong for struggling with royal expectations." James felt deeply honored by Charlotte's gratitude and recognition. His role as her protection officer had evolved into something much more meaningful. He had helped guide a confused and overwhelmed child toward a mature understanding of service, authenticity, and leadership. "Princess Charlotte," James replied, "watching you grow and learn has been one of the greatest privileges of my career. You've taught me as much as I've taught you about courage, empathy, and finding strength in vulnerability." As Charlotte settled into bed on Christmas Eve, she reflected on the extraordinary journey she had taken over the past few months. The memorial service for Queen Elizabeth II had awakened questions about her role and responsibilities that initially felt overwhelming. Through the support of James, her family, and her own experiences with people like the children at Millfield Primary School, she had developed a mature understanding of what it meant to be a princess in the modern world. Her smile, which had disappeared for a time as she grappled with complex emotions and expectations, had returned transformed. It was no longer the simple, carefree expression of a young child, but the authentic smile of someone who understood that genuine joy could coexist with serious responsibilities and genuine concerns. Charlotte's transformation represented something deeper than just personal growth. It embodied the evolution of the modern monarchy itself. She was learning to balance tradition with authenticity, duty with personal expression, and public service with private emotions. These lessons would serve her well as she continued to grow into her role as a future leader of the royal family. James completed his final security checks of the evening and prepared to enjoy his own Christmas Eve with his family. As he left Kensington Palace, he reflected on the remarkable young woman Princess Charlotte was becoming. The anxious, confused child who had worried about disappointing others had grown into someone who understood that true service came from authentic connection with others, even during difficult times. The story of Charlotte's smile fading and returning represented more than just a childhood challenge overcome. It was a lesson about resilience, growth, and the power of authentic leadership that would resonate throughout her life. Queen Elizabeth II's final letter had provided the perfect conclusion to Charlotte's journey of understanding, confirming that the questions she had asked and the struggles she had faced were not signs of weakness but evidence of the wisdom and empathy that would make her an exceptional leader. As Christmas morning approached, Charlotte slept peacefully, her dreams filled with memories of the children she had met, the family who supported her, and the great-grandmother whose love and wisdom continued to guide her path. Her smile had indeed faded for a time, but it had returned stronger, more authentic, and more meaningful than ever before. The royal guard who had broken the silence with his honesty and support had helped her discover that true strength came not from hiding vulnerability, but from transforming it into service and connection with others.